Before the video starts, here's a quick shout out to Nishant, Abhishek, Amarnath, Aaron, and Salman. For a shout out in the next video, type your comment, like the video, and make sure that you're subscribed with notifications. The comments with the most likes will get a shout out in the next video. Good morning, YouTube. I'm Oggy F. This is a Triumph Street Triple R, and after riding it for close to about a week now, here's my review of it. Welcome to the channel. Now we'll start off by talking about the rider's triangle. The handlebars, as you can see, are nice and wide, and they are set in such a way that you can either tuck in like this and ride aggressively, or sit upright like this and ride comfortably. So your upper body can adjust into multiple positions while you're sitting. Again, of course, this depends on the rider's height. The seat height on this motorcycle isn't too intimidating. I'm 5'10" and I can easily flat foot the motorcycle, and I think someone who's about 5'5", 5'6" also should be able to ride this motorcycle fairly easily. Now what's interesting is that the foot pegs on this motorcycle are set a little further back and a little higher than I thought they would have. Now riding the previous generation, well, not really the previous, but the first generation Street Triple 675 that my friend Sahil had, this seems a lot more sportier when it comes to the setup of the foot pegs. And I think over a longer period of time in the saddle, that might cause some amount of discomfort in your knees and in your ankles. Again, I thought the position of the foot pegs would cause discomfort very quickly, but when we went on a weekend ride, I started to realize that if you hook the heel of your motorcycle boot onto the foot peg and ride instead of riding with the balls of your feet on it, then that discomfort can be delayed to some extent. The seat, while it is on the firmer side, never really caused a lot of discomfort, and it is spacious enough for you to move around and, you know, try and get your knee down if you wanted to. While we're also talking about the rider's triangle, I think it's worth mentioning the shape of the tank too. The tank itself isn't too wide, so you don't end up doing yoga poses, and it isn't too slim, so you don't have to struggle to find the right way to grip the tank with your thighs. Also, I think the way that the tank is shaped allows you to very easily hang off the motorcycle when you do start to ride spiritedly. It reminds me a lot of the shape of the tank on the RTR 200 that we were riding at the racetrack, and I'm only saying that because I've completed my California Superbike School Level 1 and Level 2 courses on that motorcycle. So I have very fond memories of it, and that's a compliment to both TVS and Triumph for the way they've designed these tanks. Now, while most of you would buy this motorcycle to ride solo, some of you might have a Pillion to ride along with you. And if you're like me, then you might have to take his or her opinion into consideration too. So I took Pillion Prime for a short spin around the city recently, and here are her thoughts about Pillion comfort. So Pillion Prime, you've had the chance to sit on this Triumph Street Triple R for about 60 odd kilometers today. What are your thoughts about Pillion comfort?
Only Pillion comfort? Huh?
Well, yeah, okay, Pillion comfort and whatever else you want to add.
Well, at least the fuel didn't run out, so it was okay. So initially when I sat on it yesterday, it was pretty comfortable, but today when we sat on it and went for this long ride,
60 kilometers.
60 kilometers, it felt a little uncomfortable, like my right knee was hurting more, and I think maybe it was your riding skills, but I don't want to go into that. But maybe with all the knowledge that you have given me, I think the suspension, the rear suspension wasn't like adjusted.
Wow.
I think it's the stock suspension something, but normally the adjustment that you do, whatever, 2 centimeters higher. So
Centimeters higher, wow, okay.
yeah, no?
No, but continue.
Okay, but probably
This is entertaining now. So then tell me this, so the seat cushion, was the seat comfortable?
No, it wasn't really, like for my bony wasn't.
Okay, and then what about the placement of the foot pegs? Was that a little too high, or was that okay?
It would have been a little lower, would have been comfortable. Would have been a little more
But
comfortable.
a little lower, I think would have been then affected my foot pegs and my foot, I think, on my. But yeah, I guess.
But I'm no.
Yeah.
But Adventure 390.
Oh, so that's still your favorite then
That's
from all
my
of the.
favorite. From all.
Now, with Pillion comfort out of the way, let's get back to business. Let's talk about that sweet engine, shall we? This is easily one of the more tractable motors that I've had a chance to ride, especially when it comes to the bigger motorcycles. It also remains buttery smooth even when you start to climb up the rev range. And here's where I'll start to compare this motorcycle with the Street Triple RS, which is the topmost motorcycle that Triumph offers in the Street Triple range. You see, when it comes to the power that these two motorcycles make, there's very little between them. I think there's 5 PS of power between this and the RS. When it comes to torque though, they're identical. And in the real world, torque is what matters more. You see, when I was riding it in the city and on the highway over the last few days, there's no point in time where I thought, oh, I need 5 extra PS of power. And again, I don't really ride big bikes very often, but even if you were someone who rides bigger motorcycles daily, I think the only place you'd really notice the difference is on the racetrack, where you would be higher up the rev range, going at higher speeds, and that's probably when you'll say, oh, I need 5 PS more power. On the street, considering how fast this motorcycle can go, I doubt you'll ever reach there anytime soon, especially with the road conditions that we have in our metros. And the traffic, of course, to add to them. What Triumph has also added is rider modes to the Street Triple R. You get rain, road, sport, and a rider customizable mode, which I haven't really been able to configure, and I've been trying to go through all of the options. I guess I'll need to speak with Sherman later today when I'm returning this motorcycle to figure that out. While we're on the topic of the electronics on this motorcycle, Triumph has also included a bi-directional quick shifter as standard on the Street Triple R. So without using my hands now, we're in 3rd gear. I can shift over to 4th seamlessly, shift over to 5th seamlessly, and if I want to shift down the gears also, I can just bang down the gears when I want, 4th and 3rd. And again, it does it very, very easily without a lot of jerking and whatnot because of the slipper clutch that's included as standard. Let's now move into how this motorcycle handles. At 168 kgs, this is the lightest motorcycle in the middleweight segment currently on offer in India. It's not the lightest by a mile, but it is the lightest if titles count. Just like all of those titles at the Atal channel earlier this month. Now, because of the way the motorcycle has been set up, its weight, its suspension, seat height, wide handlebars, and those foot pegs, it makes it very easy to maneuver it in city traffic and even on the highway as well in the twisties in case you wanted to get a little more adventurous. In fact, from all the bigger motorcycles that I've had a chance to ride, I think this one was the easiest to get accustomed to and the easiest to live with even in the city, which is saying a lot, at least in terms of handling. In fact, over the weekend when we were riding a little faster in corners, all I needed to do was just lean the bike over just a little bit using the wide handlebars, pick a line and then just throttle out of it, and the motorcycle was very forgiving and it went through that corner like it was on rails. Now that's down to the suspension being as great as it is, and it's also down to those tires being as grippy as they are, and we'll get to that in a second, but let's talk about the suspension first. The front suspension on the Street Triple R is fully adjustable. When it wasn't offered on the S, which was the outgoing model, and it was always available on the RS, which is the range topping model. The rear suspension also is completely adjustable. Again, wasn't offered on the S, was always offered on the RS. Now, while the amount of adjustability that you might have available on offer would be different between this and the RS, because that gets slightly more expensive hardware than this does. It gets a Öhlins at the back and Showa big piston forks up front, while this gets big piston separate function forks and a Showa adjustable monoshock at the back. But for the price you're paying for this one, which is almost 2.5 lakhs less than the RS, this is definitely value for money at this price point. Now, coming to the tires, this gets Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3s on it, while the RS gets Pirelli's Super Corsas, which are more track-based tires than road tires, but I mean they still would do a brilliant job on the road. The difference is that they won't last as long as the Diablo Rosso 3s. These would then give you, of course, more mileage, but also along with that, a very, very good level of performance to use both in the wet and the dry conditions, which we were fortunate enough to test out over the last week. In fact, the grip levels on this tire are so good that you'll probably reach the peak of your ability as a rider before you reach the complete range of grip available on that tire. They are really that good. Right up there, in fact, with the Bridgestone Battlax tires that I had on the Suzuki GSX S750. Now, with great power should come great stopping ability, and the brakes on these don't disappoint at all. The RS and the R have the same braking hardware at the rear. At the front is where things start to get interesting. The RS gets the M50 monoblock calipers from Brembo. This gets the M4.32 brake calipers from Brembo. Now again, I've not had a chance to ride a motorcycle that had the M50 calipers, but this for me, up until now, from all the motorcycles I've had a chance to ride, is probably the best set of brakes that I've ever experienced. There's quite a lot of bite, and in fact there's no lack of bite available, and there is a significant amount of feel and feedback available at that front lever. And it's strange because this doesn't have a radially mounted master cylinder. Now, coming to the new headlight unit, which I know was very controversial when Triumph released the RS. Not a lot of people like the aggressive look that the RS headlights came with, and I'm sure they'd be split when it comes to the R's headlight too, considering it's exactly the same. I personally like it. I think those DRLs at the front give it a nice aggressive look, and at the same time, while they look really good, the headlights themselves perform really well at night. In fact, I'll overlay a clip of me riding, well, not in complete darkness, but on a badly lit highway in Mumbai, and the headlights did a really good job of illuminating the road ahead. The one thing I dislike about the light setup is the placement of these indicators at the front. It's kind of strange that Triumph put them where they are, which is at the widest point of the motorcycle, and in a city like Mumbai where a lot of people ride very close to you, I was constantly worrying about, losing an indicator or two during my commutes in the city. Now, on the day when I picked up this motorcycle from Triumph Motorcycles in Mumbai, I had asked you guys to ask me your questions using an Instagram story. About 70 or 75% of the questions in there were related to heat management, and I understand your concern. An engine this big, making that much power, the question isn't really will it heat up. I think the question was more centered around how much does it affect the whole riding experience. Now, when I was riding with my friends over the weekend, and even today when I'm riding, as you can see, that heat gauge is just 1 bar above the halfway mark. So it's very well managed, and you don't feel any of that heat on your legs. But when we were doing the LBS mark test the other day, the heat gauge was just 1 bar from being completely full. And while the hot air was being directed away from the rider's legs, there was still a significant amount of heat that I felt in my knees, in my right knee to be specific. Let's also talk about the instrument console on this motorcycle. While it's not the TFT screen that you get on the Street Triple RS, it still packs a load of features. And a lot of you have messaged me saying that you prefer the analog and digital combination versus just the TFT screen on the RS. So I guess it comes down to personal preference. The only other major advantage that the TFT screen on the RS would give you is the ability to connect via Bluetooth and also then control your GoPro to some extent. And because of that, it would get additional switch gears on the left, which this doesn't get. It just gets a button to cycle through the riding modes and to cycle through the information available, which, mind you, there is quite a lot of. Another question a lot of you had was around the ground clearance, and at 160 millimeters high, this doesn't sit really far away from the ground, but in my week with the motorcycle, there wasn't a single instance of me scraping the belly of this bike, and even with a Pillion, that didn't happen. Granted, we are not the heaviest people you'd meet, but still, I guess you'd have to figure that out for yourself. Good news though is that the suspension is customizable and tunable for your weight and height. Now I keep saying this, that you should buy a motorcycle based on a holistic decision of whether you can not only afford it but also afford the maintenance costs before you end up selling it on OLX. I think OLX might hate me by now. To help you make that decision, I've put the service intervals and the cost of the consumables which would most frequently be changed on your motorcycle on the screen right now, so you can accordingly decide whether this motorcycle is a good fit for you in terms of price and cost of maintenance. And for my final conclusions, let's head indoors. With the gap in performance between the RS now being reduced further with the exclusion of the S and the inclusion of the R in India, the R is starting to look like a much better option. Especially if you're not someone who hits the track regularly, who can't ride beyond the R's limit, so taking a test ride is important. And if you can do without the extra premium hardware that the RS offers over the R, especially considering even with the BS6 updates and the additional hardware, that the R is now cheaper than the S, which is the outgoing model. If you mostly ride solo, whether it's in the city or on the highways, and if you're looking to upgrade from a 300 to 400cc motorcycle to something bigger, and even plan on doing the occasional track day, then the Street Triple 765R should definitely be on your list of potential motorcycles. Now, I'm sure you've got a lot of questions. Ask them away in the comment section. I respond to all sensible questions. So, as always guys, at least wear your helmets while riding your motorcycles and ride safe. It's a freaking jungle out there. Goodbye. So you see, riding it over the weekend and in the city, there wasn't any point in time when I thought, my god, this chapri dude with his loud ass scooter. I'll just slow down and let him go ahead. Yeah, and when I was riding it during this, and here comes a bullet. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. For those of you interested in hearing what this sounds like, here goes. It's a miracle the bike doesn't have any scratches on it till now. These guys are insane. Huh? I have no idea. It's like some adventure course like they made here, dude. Oh, you try it out first. Oh, looked way worse than it was. Actually, there was quite a bit of unevenness in there.
Boss with a great bag, came up, you can't hate that. Self-made, you can't take that. Yeah, self-made, you can't make that. Some said I need a record deal, I need a co-sign, I need a Dre track. But all the time I had a mean flow, I had a cold grind, and that's a great match.